So you've decided to move to Chicago. Well, before you do, stop right there and watch this video because we're gonna be going over specifically 10 things you must know before buying a condo in Chicago. So when you think about Chicago, most of you probably think about the Chicago skyline, you think about high-rises, and while a lot of the inventory and the product here in Chicago are high-rise condominiums, we also have a lot of condos that are in smaller, more boutique buildings. So this video is going to apply to both of those. And I'll kind of differentiate in different parts throughout this video between something that may be a larger scale building, and we're talking high rises from 150 plus units, to something maybe as small as a 3-unit walk-up building. But today we're just strictly gonna be talking about condos. There's a lot of different property types throughout Chicago, but today we're gonna zone in on condos because that is a large majority of the inventory here in Chicago are the condominiums. Just going off my short list here, we have association fees we're gonna get into, special assessments, rules and regulations, thinking about resale value, location, amenities, different things like building reserves, financing, and some other tips and tricks that we're gonna get into. So without further ado, buckle up. Before you buy a condo here in Chicago, you're gonna wanna watch this video, save this video, share it with a friend, and be sure to comment down below any questions you have, and I'm happy to answer them. Welcome back to another video. My name is Jordan Pyle, and I'm your go-to Chicago real estate agent. If today's video has been helpful and you're thinking about moving to Chicago, my team and I would be honored for the opportunity to help out and help you achieve your real estate goals. So feel free to just text the number on the screen here. That is a direct line to me. We will get in touch with you. We will figure out more about your upcoming move and how we can best support you. Also, there's more information and some free information and guides down in the description below. Go check all that out, and let's get on into today's video. Be sure to hit the subscribe button before you go so you can catch all of our future videos. So the first thing we're breaking down today are association fees. So when you're buying a condo in Chicago and anywhere else in the country, there are gonna be association dues, or your HOA dues is another term that a lot of people kind of use interchangeably, right? And these are gonna go towards things such as your common insurance, your maintenance, your trash, snow removal, different things like that that are more shared expenses for a building. So let's just take an example of whether it's a 10-unit building or a 160-unit building. You're gonna have different types of expenses that the building has in terms of its operating expenses to run on a daily basis. So when you pay HOA dues, this is gonna go towards covering some of those expenses based on the amount that you own, or what we like to call as realtors, your percentage of ownership in the building, right? And so every single year you can expect for those to remain relatively stable to accommodate for future projects. You may want to consider a 3 to 5% bump every single year in your overall monthly HOA dues. These are gonna pretty much cover everything, but a lot of buildings, the things that you're gonna have outside of the HOA dues itself that you owe is you're gonna usually have some type of combination of your gas bill, which is through People's Gas, your electric bill through Commonwealth Edison or ComEd, and then a lot of times your cable and internet. Some buildings do cover 1, 2, or all of those. However, a lot of times you're just gonna wanna look into a little bit more so you can see exactly how much money you're paying each month, what that covers, and what other outstanding expenses outside of what that covers that you're gonna be responsible for. We always talk about in Chicago that you really wanna focus on monthly payment versus purchase price because your HOAs can vary greatly. You may have a same size condo in one area of the city where the HOA is $1,000 a month, and in another area of the city, it may be $150 a month. So this is gonna really change the affordability when it comes to a monthly payment. So making sure you know the upper end and what the lower ends are of your monthly payment, this will help you zone in on buildings and condominiums that work for you in your budget. Second thing we're gonna talk about with condominiums is you're gonna wanna ask this question. Are there any special assessments, either current, pending, or planned in the next 2 fiscal years? This is gonna be a question that you're gonna wanna ask because you are basically saving your ass, so to speak, to make sure that you're not gonna be buying in the building, and then within a year or two, there's gonna be some type of large capital expenditure that's gonna set you back, right? Because typically the way these works is some of the building reserves, and we'll get into that later and what that means exactly, but think of it just like the operating account for the building. Some of that is allocated towards future special assessments or routine capital expenditures. However, let's just say that the building is coming up and it's at a point where it needs a brand new roof or it needs some other type of large project that it is too much and it costs too much that it will drain the reserve account, most of the time they're gonna issue what's called a special assessment. So they're gonna take whatever the cost of the project is to complete it, and they're gonna divide that out by that same thing we talked about before, your percentage of ownership. Let's just say a high-rise need brand new windows. This could be upwards of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for some of these special assessments. So making sure you understand exactly what the health of the building is, how much is in the reserves, if there's any special assessments, and if there are, making sure your agent is catching them throughout the under contract process so that you can negotiate that against the seller. The next thing we're gonna talk about are the rules and regulations. So unlike owning a single family home or something else where you don't have neighbors, you are basically gonna be required to abide by a certain set of rules. And these happen to go by the rules and regulations, or in short term, the rules and regs of the building. This is gonna be things such as, what type of grills you can have out on your patio, or possibly if you're thinking about renting your unit out, what the different restrictions are against that. Do you need a 12-month lease minimum? Can you do short-term leasing? Most places in Chicago are not gonna allow short-term leasing. So that's definitely something that would be within the rules and regulations among various different items. So I'm not gonna get too much into this, but just know that obviously you have to be a good neighbor. There's gonna be basically governing docs for the HOA and that condominium association that everyone abides by. The next thing as it relates to condos is a lot of people want certain types of amenities or conveniences. So if that is you and you want a gym in the building or possibly a pool, 24-hour door staff, that's gonna be a different type of condominium than others that maybe want just a little bit more simple, a little bit less of the amenities, which therefore lead to a smaller monthly HOA payment, right? So a lot of these high-rise buildings are gonna come with what we like to call full amenity buildings. They have 24-hour door staff. They have, whether it be valet parking or some type of parking service. They have building engineers on staff. They have leasing offices in-house. They have pools, they have tennis courts, they have all the full 9 yards, right? These are often gonna come with a premium though on your monthly HOA payment. But the way most people look at this is if you're gonna spend, okay, $100 at the gym every month, you're gonna have X, Y, and Z expenses that maybe you wouldn't have if you didn't buy into a full amenity building. What are the total amount of your expenses that add up on a monthly basis? And if you're just paying a little bit more in a monthly assessment to get the pool, to be able to get the 24-hour door staff and some of these other full amenities, then it makes sense to buy that as long as it doesn't far exceed what it would cost you to buy that on the open market. However, amenities are very much a preference thing. So during the pandemic, as you can imagine, nobody could use the amenities, so people were paying these high assessments, but they weren't able to actually use what they were paying those assessments for. So amenities come, they're good and bad, depends who you are. Do you want a more convenient lifestyle where you can lock the door and everything's taken care of? Then a nice high-rise full amenity building is probably a good solution, versus if you want something a little bit more low-key, a little bit more laid back, you may be looking for more boutique buildings throughout the city of Chicago. The fourth thing you need to know before buying a condo in Chicago is how your resale value is going to be. So when you're purchasing a unit in a building, I like to look at what are the things that are either gonna make this attractive for a renter or for a new owner should I be selling this property down the road. Some of the things I consider are corner units. Maybe this is somewhere that has outdoor space such as a balcony. This might be that you have extra tall ceilings that ultimately allows for more natural light. Maybe this is something that has laundry in unit versus something else that maybe has laundry in the building. Different things like that, right? Different things that make this stand out. Maybe there's a den, right? Something unique that it's a 1+ den or 2+ den that allows for an office space. What are some things that are gonna make this, if this was stacked up side by side with other properties that are a similar price point and a similar size, what's gonna make this stand out, and what's gonna basically make sure that this is gonna be a secure rental if I decide to keep this as an investment, and that every single year, every 12 months, or whatever the frequency of the lease terms are, I'm not gonna have a problem getting demand for this. And then if I go to sell this, what can I do in terms of purchasing the unit, making money on the purchase, meaning what can I do to add value over the course of my ownership, so that when I go and sell the property down the road, then I'm actually able to have a good and a positive resale value. Just making sure that you're not buying at the very, very height of the market. And if you are, meaning if you're buying the most expensive 2-bedroom, 2-bath in a building, just know that you're probably not gonna be able to sell it for much more than that, but it should hold its value pretty well because Chicago's a pretty insulated market, and overall, over the years, Chicago just values hold pretty well. And we do see appreciation in most markets in Chicago, and it just kind of depends which neighborhood you're in because there's 77 different ones. So making sure that if you're thinking about resale value, maybe buying in an area that's a little bit more in the process of gentrification versus something that's more established like a Lincoln Park, then the chances of you being able to sell for more down the road are greater because you're buying in an area that's less established and everything's starting to catch up and gentrify. The fifth thing is we're gonna talk about location and the different types of buildings or condos that you're gonna find through different types of neighborhoods in Chicago. As I mentioned on the last point, there's 77 different ones. But if you're wanting something like a high rise, you're probably gonna wanna stay focused more on this downtown city market and like the city center. And you can also find some stuff on the east side of the city up and down Lake Michigan. This is just typically where more volume of high-rise buildings are. So take into consideration neighborhoods like River North, Streeterville, Lakeshore East, the Loop. You can even find some in Lincoln Park and the Gold Coast up and down the lakefront. So those have to be on the east side of the city for you to find those in like the Gold Coast, Lincoln Park, Lakeview, all the way up the east side of the city and along Lakeshore Drive essentially. That's gonna be what you can find that type of living. I would say probably, River North, Streeterville are the most popular in the downtown city market, where the Loop is more office buildings, a little bit less residential, even though it does exist. I would say most of my clients happen to be somewhere in that River North, like I said, Lincoln Park on the east side, or somewhere in like the Streeterville area when they're looking for high-rise living in Chicago. But if you're looking for something a little bit more low-key, laid back, maybe a 3-unit building or a mid-rise building, you can find these in areas such as the West Loop, Westtown, like Ukrainian Village, even Humboldt Park. You have Wicker Park, Bucktown, Logan Square, then going over east of the river, you have Lincoln Park, Lakeview, Wrigleyville. You're gonna find a lot of these walk-up style buildings and units more on the north side of the city of Chicago once you get past the north of like River North and Streeterville area. Jumping around a little bit here, but number 6, we're talking about the reserves of the building. So we're talking about the building reserve. So when you're on a showing or you're with your agent, you wanna know how much money is in the reserve account for the building. And like I talked about before with special assessments, the reserve account, think about that as like basically like a safety net or a savings account for the building. So in the case that projects pop up, projects need to be done from time to time, there's money in these accounts basically to cover this or to pay a portion of it so that it's gonna be less money out of pocket for each individual unit owner. So in a small, like I just talked about, maybe 3-unit walk-up building, I like to see this number somewhere around like $1,000 to $2,000, maybe $2,500 per unit. Where if you're in a high-rise building, you may see numbers closer to $8,000 or $10,000 per unit based on the reserve account. This is all dependent on how old the building is, how much the HOA dues are, any certain projects coming down the pipeline, which oftentimes leads to age. And then lastly, just how the building's run and whether it's being run in a solid and fiscally responsible fashion or whether it needs some work. 7th thing we're gonna think about when we purchase a condo in Chicago is the ability to obtain financing. And you're usually not gonna have much issues, however, you just wanna take into consideration it's gonna be a more thorough process by your lender. They're gonna really dig deep into the financials of the building, who's running it, how it's being run, how old the building is, how many projects or if any projects are coming down the pipeline that are gonna need to be paid for. They're just trying to cover their backside in making sure that there's no default on the loan and that there's not gonna be any type of catastrophic issue with the building and therefore the unit, that this unit is gonna be in jeopardy and it's gonna create more risk for them as the lender and the bank. The 8th thing that you wanna know before you purchase a condo in Chicago is, depending on the time of year and seasonality, how strong of a market or how competitive of a market it's gonna be. Because this is gonna completely change your strategy depending on what time of year it is and what the market looks like. So for example, right now we're in early spring market of 2023 when I'm recording this video, and the market is heating up. It's hot, right? There's more demand than there is supply. So if you're thinking about buying a condo, there's a whole nother way that you need to look at how you approach the showing process. How do we build rapport with the listing agent? Should we in fact actually like that unit and we want to create an offer, put an offer in, and we are in maybe a competitive situation where there's multiple offers. There's a lot of different dynamics that go into this. So I want to kind of break down that a little bit and just note that on this video is number 8. However, this is really something that you need a more personalized conversation. So this leads into my number 9 point, which is you want to hire and work with an experienced real estate agent and an experienced lender if you're getting financing. And you should reach out to one or the other, whether you reach out to a realtor or a lender first. Usually what I would recommend is you go with their preferred partners. So for example, if you reached out to me and you needed financing and you needed an attorney through the process, I have that full Rolodex, right? I spent the last 10 years creating this network, making sure that I have good people in my network that can help and service my clients, right? So if you have that situation, that's typically what I recommend. Reach out to either a lender or a realtor, get your pre-approval letter, and then work with that person's preferred people, because ultimately you're gonna get a better experience that way. The number 10 thing is you wanna consider your different exit strategies, right? A lot of buildings in Chicago do not let you buy a unit and then rent that unit out. So if you're considering buying something, I always like to look at units that are going to allow me to rent this. And maybe it's that you have to live there for 12 months and then you have the ability to rent it out, or maybe you can rent it out at any time. However, it just needs to be that there's a minimum of a 12-month lease and no short-term rentals. Chicago is not a short-term rental market. So if you're thinking about buying a short-term rental, they do exist. However, it's not really a good market for it. So just making sure though that the moral of the story here is you have different exit strategies. So if you buy a unit, making sure that you're gonna be there for a minimum of like 3 to 5 years, or if you're not gonna be there for 3 to 5 years, actually living in the unit, that you have the ability to rent that unit out. And like I said, not all buildings allow this. So when you're considering purchasing a property here in Chicago, making sure you're finding investor-friendly buildings and units so that you have various different exit strategies you can consider after you own that property for said period of time. So that rounds it out. That's the 10 things that you must know before buying a condo here in Chicago. I would be grateful for the opportunity to help you accomplish your real estate goals. If you're moving to Chicago from a different city, I have so many of you guys reaching out to me asking for my help with your upcoming move. And I also have a lot of you that have just stumbled upon my channel because you're thinking about making a move within Chicago and you either have something to sell or maybe you're transitioning from a renter to a homeowner. Well, if any of this applies to you, we'd love the opportunity to at least have a conversation, see how we can help you in your transition. So feel free to just reach out, text this number here on the screen. This is actually a direct line to me. I'm gonna personally answer that, figure out how we can help you in your upcoming move. And this video has been helpful. If you have any further questions aside from these 10 things I covered today, put them down in the comments, like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. We'll catch you on the next video. All right, peace.